The stars had been quiet for a very long time. Fleet Commander stood at the center of the bridge, his long fingers resting on the command console. His skin, like all, was thin and almost see-through. Beneath it, soft lights glowed in patterns of blue and green. These lights were how his people talked. Without words, right now his lights showed calm peace, the same feelings he had felt for the last 300 cycles of his long life. The serenity of stars was a beautiful ship. It moved through space like a creature born for the darkness between worlds. Its hull was smooth and white, powered by energy fields that made it look like it was wrapped in gentle lightning. For the hegemony, ships like this were common. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 cycles. They had met 17 different species who traveled among the stars. All of them had joined the hegemony peacefully. Why would they not? They offered knowledge, protection, and friendship. No species had ever refused. War was a memory, a dark story from ancient times that Young learned about in school and then forgot. It had no place in the modern galaxy. Commander said, navigation officer, her lights flickering with soft curiosity. We are approaching the 4th planet of this system. Standard survey shows nothing unusual. Nodded slowly. This system had no name, yet it sat at the edge of explored space, far from the busy trade routes of the hegemony. They were here to map it, record it, and move on. Simple work. Boring work, but necessary. Continue. The approach said. Complete all standard scans. We will be finished here within 2 rotations. The bridge crew moved with the slow grace of people who had no reason to hurry. 12 worked at their stations, their translucent bodies glowing with soft conversation. Someone made a joke about the food in the dining hall. Someone else complained about a minor problem with their sleeping quarters. Normal sounds, comfortable sounds. Then Science Officer Me made a sound that was not comfortable at all. It was a sharp pulse of white light from her chest, the expression of surprise. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at her. She was young, only 90 cycles old, and her inexperience showed in the way her lights flickered without control. Commander, she said, her voice tight. The long-range scanners have detected something. Felt a small spark of interest. Detected something, perhaps a new spatial phenomenon, perhaps an interesting asteroid formation, perhaps even signs of primitive life on one of the planets. These things happen sometimes on survey missions. Show me, he said. Me's fingers moved across her console. The main viewing screen at the front of the bridge changed from a simple star map to a detailed sensor display, and there near the 4th planet were 3 shapes that should not exist. Slight shifted to pale yellow. Confusion. 3 vessels, Me reported. Unknown design, unknown energy signatures. They are holding position near the planet's largest moon. First Commander stepped forward. He was older than his skin, showing the slight cloudiness that came with age. His lights were steady and controlled. Unknown. That is not possible. We have records of every space-faring species in this region. These ships match no known records. Me said. She was trying to keep her voice calm, but her lights betrayed her nervousness. They are strange, Commander, very strange. Walked closer to the screen. He studied the 3 vessels with growing curiosity. They were ugly things, where ships were smooth and curved. These vessels were blocky and angular, sharp edges, flat surfaces. They looked like They had been built by someone who had never heard of elegance. More than that, they looked primitive. Could see what appeared to be solid metal plating covering their holes. Metal, actual physical metal, no energy shields, or at least none that the scanners could detect. Small ports along the sides suggested chemical propulsion systems burning fuel to move through space like the first crude rockets that had built thousands of cycles ago. These are not hegemony vessels, said slowly, and they matched no species we have encountered. The bridge fell silent. Every present understood what this meant. First contact, a new species. This had not happened in over 200 cycles. This is a great moment, said his lights brightening with excitement. We must initiate contact protocols immediately. Think of what we might learn from them. Think of what we might teach them. Nodded, but something felt wrong. He could not explain it. The ships just sat there near that moon waiting. They had not moved since the scanners found them. Were they watching the serenity of stars? Did they know that we're here? Open a hailing frequency, ordered all standard first contact channels, mathematical greeting sequences, universal peace symbols. Let them know we mean no harm. Communications officer Ani nodded and began working at her console. A moment later, a soft chime indicated that the message had been sent. The greeting would broadcast on every frequency they used. It included prime number sequences, mathematics that any intelligent species would recognize, along with simple diagrams showing two figures meeting peacefully. They waited. The stars continued their slow dance. The three unknown ships did not move. No response, Ani reported. After several long moments, they are receiving our signal. I can confirm that, but they are not responding. Perhaps they need time to translate our message, suggested. We should be patient. First contact is always difficult, agreed, but his unease was growing. He turned to me. Continue your scans. I want to know everything about those ships. What are they made of? What powers them? And most importantly, who is aboard them? Me nodded and bent over her console. The deep scanners of the serenity of stars were incredibly powerful. They could detect life signs from across a solar system. They could analyze the chemical composition of a planet from orbit. They could count the number of beings on a ship and tell you what those beings had eaten for breakfast. The first results came quickly. Hull composition is primarily iron and titanium alloys. Me reported very dense, very heavy. Their propulsion systems use controlled chemical explosions, hydrogen and oxygen combustion. It appears extremely inefficient compared to our technology. Primitive, murmured. They must be a very young species, probably just achieved recently. That would explain their lack of response, said. They may not understand that we are attempting communication. Continue scanning me. What about the crews? How many beings are aboard those vessels? Me's fingers danced across her console. The deep scanners focused their attention on the three ships, probing through the metal hulls to find the life within, and then Me stopped moving. Her lights went out, all of them. Every bioluminescent pattern in her body simply vanished, leaving her skin dark and empty. This was absolute black, the most extreme expression of emotion I could display. It meant terror, complete and total terror. Me stepped toward her. What is wrong? What do you see? When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Commander, These readings must be wrong. Scanners must be damaged. This cannot be real. The bridge crew had gone. Completely still, their lights flickered. With growing fear, me was the best science officer in the fleet. If something had frightened her this badly, it must be truly terrible. Show us. Said his own lights had begun to dim. Without his permission, me transferred the data to the main screen. For a moment no one spoke, no one could speak. They simply stared at the information scrolling before them, trying to understand what they were seeing. It started with the planet these beings came from. The scanners had traced the ship's energy signatures back to their home system. They had found their world of origin, and that world was classified automatically and without hesitation as a Class 12. Class 12, the highest possible danger rating, a world so hostile to life that evolution should have been impossible. The data painted a picture of hell. Gravity, 1 standard units, crushing force that would flatten most known species. Atmosphere, a toxic mixture dominated by oxygen, a highly corrosive gas that bonded with almost everything it touched. It made metal rust. It made organic material decay. It was literally poison in gas form. Temperature range, extreme fluctuations from frozen wastelands to boiling deserts, sometimes within the same planetary region during different seasons. The planet had a molten core of liquid metal that generated powerful radiation fields. It was constantly bombarded by energy from its star. Its surface was covered, absolutely covered in microscopic life forms engaged in endless biological warfare, bacteria, viruses, parasites, all fighting each other in a never-ending struggle for survival. And somehow, impossibly, a species had evolved there, a species that had not just survived on this death world, but thrived there, built civilizations there, and now traveled among the stars. This cannot be accurate, said his voice was shaking. No complex life can develop on a Class 12 world. The textbooks say this is impossible. The scanners do not lie, me replied. She was still completely dark, her terror too deep for any light to escape. But that is not the worst part. First, Commander, the biological readings of the creatures themselves. She highlighted the next section of data. Read it. And then he read it again. Because the first time did not make sense, the second time did not make sense either. The third time he finally began to understand, and understanding made everything worse. The creatures aboard those ships were made of nightmares. They had skeletons made of calcium, rigid structures that grew inside their bodies rather than outside. They carried their armor beneath their flesh like a framework of bone hidden under soft, vulnerable skin. If those bones broke, their bodies would attempt to repair them, not replace them with new bones, but actually regrow the damaged ones, self-healing internal armor. Their blood was red, filled with iron that carried oxygen through their bodies, the same corrosive oxygen that filled their atmosphere. They breathed poison. They pumped poison through their veins. Poison was essential to their survival. Their immune systems were weapons of biological destruction. Entire armies of cells lived inside them, constantly fighting invaders. These beings did not simply get sick and die from disease. They fought back. They killed the microorganisms that attacked them. Some of them had been exposed to deadly pathogens and survived. Their bodies remembered the attackers and became stronger against future infections. Their muscles were dense and powerful, evolved to fight against the crushing gravity of their world. They could lift objects many times heavier than themselves. They could run for long distances without stopping. They could survive injuries that would kill most species, broken limbs, damaged organs, massive blood loss, and continue functioning through pain that should have rendered them unconscious. And then there was the chemical called adrenaline. When these creatures perceived danger, their bodies flooded with this substance. It made them faster, stronger. It reduced their ability to feel pain. It made their hearts pound and their muscles tense for combat. It was a built-in combat enhancement system, something that turned them from dangerous into deadly with a single chemical reaction. But the detail that makes lights go completely dark, the thing that filled him with more fear than he had ever felt in 300 cycles of life, was their eyes. The creatures had two eyes set in the front of their heads, forward-facing. Binocular vision. This was not the eye placement of prey animals. Prey animals had eyes on the sides of their heads, giving them wide vision to watch for danger from all directions. Forward-facing eyes were the mark of a predator, a hunter, a species that had evolved not to run from danger, but to chase it, to track it, to kill it. These creatures were apex predators from a death world, and they had just detected the serenity of stars. Commander Annie said, her voice rising with alarm, "We are receiving a transmission from the unknown vessels." Everyone turned to the communications console, forced his lights to return to a calm blue, though he did not feel calm at all. He needed to be a leader now. His crew was terrified. They needed to see him in control. "Play the transmission," he ordered. The bridge filled with sound. It was not like any language they had ever heard. Harsh sounds, sharp sounds, a deep rumbling voice that seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. The translation matrix struggled to decode it, processing the strange phonemes and trying to find meaning in the alien words. After several seconds, a rough translation appeared on screen. "Unknown vessel, you have entered United Earth Coalition space. State your INTS. You have 60 seconds to comply." United Earth Coalition. So they had a name, and they had claimed this territory as their own, and they were giving the peaceful exploration vessel a deadline. "A threat. They are warning us," said they. "Think we are intruders. We must respond immediately," Annie said. "If we can communicate with them, explain that we mean no harm, do that." Interrupted, "Send them a message of peace. Tell them we are explorers. Tell them we wish only to learn and share knowledge. Use every translation protocol we have." Ani worked quickly. New message was composed and sent, carrying with it every symbol of friendship, the new peace offerings, submission gestures, everything that said, "We are not your enemy." While they waited for a response, turned back to the biological data. He studied the creatures aboard those ships. The data showed that their bodies were constantly active. Their hearts beat without stopping. They breathed constantly. Their brains never fully shut down. Even during rest periods, they were always processing, always alert, always ready. And they leaked. The scanners detected water vapor, oils, and salt constantly escaping from their skin. They shed biological material wherever they went. Their very presence would contaminate Any environment they entered, they were not just dangerous, they were a biohazard simply by existing. How can they be real? Someone whispered. Did not see who spoke, it did not matter, everyone was thinking the same thing. Commander, me said, her voice had changed. It was no longer afraid, it was worse than afraid, it was the voice of someone who had just realized something horrible. I found additional data in our historical archives. What kind of data? 300 cycles ago, one of our deep space probes passed through a system matching these energy signatures. It detected a Class 12 world with signs of primitive technology, radio waves, chemical pollution, evidence of basic nuclear reactions. Felt cold, and the probe's mission controller classified the planet as uninhabitable. No follow-up was conducted. The system was marked as worthless and forgot. Me finally looked up from her console. Her eyes met. We knew they were there, Commander. 300 cycles ago, we knew, and we ignored them. We thought nothing dangerous could evolve on such a world. We were wrong. Thought we were very, very wrong. Commander Navigation Officer shouted. Her lights were flashing red. Danger. Danger, danger. The unknown vessels are moving. They are changing course. Looked at the main screen. The three ugly primitive ships had broken formation. They were turning. Their crude engines were firing, pushing them onto a new trajectory. A trajectory that would bring them directly to the serenity of stars. They are coming toward us. Breath, can we outrun them? Asked. Ran the calculations. Her lights flickered with disbelief. No, Commander, their acceleration is higher than it should be. Their ships are heavily built, but they are pushing them beyond safe limits. If they maintain that acceleration, they will intercept us in less than 2 hours. 2 hours, 2 hours. Until those death world predators reach them. Power up the defensive screens. Ordered. Prepare for potential hostility, but do not, I repeat, do not charge any weapons. We cannot be the ones to start a conflict. The crew moved quickly now, their earlier calm completely gone. The serenity of stars hummed with new energy as systems that had been dormant for centuries came to life. Shield generators, sensor arrays, emergency protocols that no one had ever expected to use stood at the center of the bridge and watched the three ships approach. They were still ugly, still primitive, still made of nothing but metal and fire, but they were not afraid. That was what terrified him most. A young species facing a vessel far more advanced than their own should have been cautious, careful, willing to talk before taking risks. These creatures were not cautious, they were not careful. They saw the serenity of stars with its glowing shields and its elegant design and its technology that was thousands of cycles beyond their own, and they were coming toward it. Anyway, what are they? Asked quietly. Did not answer. He did not have an answer. He only knew that the galaxy had suddenly become a much more dangerous place. The ships drew closer. The stars watched in silence. And aboard the serenity of stars, they waited to learn whether they would survive their first meeting with humanity. The three ships grew larger on the viewing screen with every passing moment. Fleet Commander had not moved from his position at the center of the bridge. His lights cycled through patterns of blue and yellow. Calm authority mixed with deep unease. Around him, his crew worked intense silence. The easy comfort of their routine mission had vanished completely. Now they moved with the jerky motions of people who were trying very hard not to. Panic time to intercept asked, 1 hour and 43 minutes, navigation officer. Replied they are maintaining their acceleration, their engine output is far beyond safe parameters for vessels of that design. They should be concerned about structural failure. They are not concerned, First Commander said grimly. That much is clear, science. Officer Me had been working at her console without pause since the ships had changed course. Her lights remained dark, but her fingers moved quickly. Across the controls, she was gathering every piece of information she could about these strange beings, every data point, every reading, everything that might help them understand what they were facing. Commander, she said, I have completed my analysis of their ships. Turned to her. Tell me. Me took a breath. Among they. This was an unusual gesture. They did not need to breathe deeply for oxygen the way other species did, but the action was calming. It gave her a moment to organize her thoughts before speaking. Their vessels are war machines, she said. There is no other explanation. Every aspect of their design points to combat. The words hung in the air. War machines. The concept felt ancient, foreign, like a story from before civilization. Explain, said. Me pulled up a detailed diagram of the largest human ship on the main screen. It was ugly, but there was a certain brutal efficiency to its design that became clearer the longer one looked at it. The hull is constructed from layered metal alloys, iron, titanium, and several compounds I do not recognize. The layers are designed to absorb and distribute impact energy. This is armor, Commander. Physical armor. It is designed to be hit by what? Asked. By everything. Me highlighted several points on the ship. These ports along the sides contain magnetic acceleration systems. I believe they are called in theoretical physics texts. They use electromagnetic force to launch solid projectiles at extreme velocities. The kinetic energy of such an impact would be devastating. Kinetic weapons murmured that had abandoned such primitive technology long ago. Why throw objects when you could use energy beams? It was inefficient, wasteful, but it was also simple, reliable. Chunk of metal traveling at a significant fraction of light speed did not care how advanced your technology was. It would destroy whatever it hit. There is more. Me continued. These larger ports here and here appear to be launch tubes for self-propelled missiles. The energy signatures suggest nuclear warheads, fusion devices, possibly, maybe, even antimatter. Nuclear weapon, said. His lights flashed with disbelief. They put nuclear weapons on their ships. They put nuclear weapons everywhere. Me corrected. My scans of their home system show traces of nuclear detonations on their own planet. Old traces, hundreds of cycles old. They used nuclear weapons on themselves. Silence filled the bridge. The idea was difficult to process. A species that had access to nuclear technology and used it on their own world, used it on their own kind. What sort of beings did such things? Their point defense systems are also impressive. Me continued, her voice growing more strained. Small, rapid fire kinetic weapons designed to shoot down incoming projectiles. Their sensors are primitive compared to ours, but they are robust. They use multiple redundant systems. If one fails, others take over. They expect their equipment to be Damage during combat, they planned for it. And their shields asked, they have none. The statement landed like a physical blow. No shields, a space-faring vessel without energy shields was almost unthinkable. How did they protect themselves from radiation, from micrometeorites, from the countless hazards of space travel? They rely entirely on their physical armor, me explained, and on their ability to repair damage while still fighting. Their ships have compartmentalized sections that can be sealed off if breached. They can lose entire portions of their vessel and continue to function. That is insane, someone whispered. That is their way, me said. Their entire approach to technology is built around one assumption: things will go wrong, things will break, things will try to kill them, and they will keep functioning anyway. Walked closer to the screen, he studied the human vessels with new eyes. What he had first seen as primitive now looked different, not crude, practical, built not for elegance but for survival, for endurance, for war. What about the crews, he asked. Have you learned more about the beings themselves? Me hesitated. Her lights flickered with something that might have been reluctance. I have been studying the data extensively. There is much to learn, much that is difficult to accept. We need to know, said, whatever it is. We need to know. Me nodded and changed the display. Now the screen showed biological information, complex charts, and diagrams that painted a picture of the creatures called humans. They are persistent predators, she began. I do not understand that term, said. On their world there were many ways to hunt for food. Some predators used ambush, hiding and striking quickly. Some used speed, running down prey, short bursts, but humans evolved a different strategy. They followed their prey for hours, for days, sometimes for weeks. Felt his lights dim. Days they hunted for days. Their bodies are designed for it. Me said they cannot run as fast as many prey animals, but they can run for much longer. They have efficient cooling systems. They release water through their skin to regulate temperature. They can maintain steady movement while their prey exhausts itself trying to escape, so they would simply follow. Asked, her voice small. Yes, the prey animal would run. It would seem to escape. It would stop to rest. And then the humans would appear on the horizon, still coming, always coming. The prey would run again, stop again, and the humans would appear again. This would continue until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Then the humans would walk up to it and kill it. The bridge was completely silent. Every was imagining the same thing, being chased, escaping, thinking you were safe, and then seeing your pursuers appear again and again and again, never stopping, never giving up, never getting tired. This is why they are following us. Breath, this is their hunting instinct. We ran and now they are pursuing. We did not run, said, but his voice lacked conviction. They had changed course when the ships first moved. They had tried to maintain distance to the humans that probably looked exactly like prey behavior. There is more, me said. Their history. I have been able to intercept and decode some of their communications. They use radio waves for short range transmission, very easy to read. What have you learned? Me changed the display again. Now it showed images captured from the human transmissions, translated and enhanced by the computers. They were strange images, alien images, images of a world that seemed determined to kill everything that lived on it. Their planet has experienced multiple Extinction-level events. Me said. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, mass dying events that killed most of the life on their world. This has happened not once, not twice, but many times over billions of cycles. And they survived. Every time, they were not always the dominant species, but when disaster struck, they adapted, they survived. They rebuilt, no matter how many times their world tried to destroy them. They refused to die. The images shifted. Now they showed humans themselves strain. Soft-looking creatures with pale or brown or black skin, 2 arms, 2 legs, forward-facing eyes that seemed to stare out of the screen with uncomfortable intensity. They have mastered fire, me continued. They use controlled combustion for everything: heat, light, power, weapons. They cook their food intentionally, destroying parts of it to make it easier to digest and to kill harmful microorganisms. They burn their food. Asked, they burn everything. Their entire civilization is built on burning things. They burn dead organisms for fuel. They burn atoms for power. They burn hydrogen for propulsion. Fire is so central to their culture that they have hundreds of words for it in each of their many languages. Many languages. They are not unified, me said, or rather, they were not unified until recently. Their species developed in separate groups across their planet. Each group created its own language, its own culture, its own way of seeing the world. They spent most of their history fighting each other. Closed his eyes. A species that fought itself. A species that made war not just against other creatures but against its own kind. What sort of evolutionary pressure could possibly produce such beings? The fighting has decreased, me added. They formed something called the United Earth Coalition approximately 70 cycles ago. Before that, they had conflicts on a scale I find difficult to comprehend. They called them world wars, global conflicts that killed millions of their own kind. Millions. Lights were flashing white. With shock, they killed millions of themselves in single conflicts. Yes, their history is soaked in blood. Their word for the oxygen-carrying fluid inside their bodies. They have fought over territory, over resources, over ideologies, over religious beliefs. Sometimes it seems they fought simply because they could not stop fighting, and yet they survived. Said they did more than survive, Commander. After each war they became more advanced. Conflict drives their innovation. Many of their greatest technologies were developed for military purposes first and then adapted for peaceful use, including the ships that are currently approaching us. Look at those ships on the screen, war machines. Me had called them. Now he understood why these vessels were not exploration craft. They were not cargo haulers. They were weapons crewed by a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of destruction. And they were less than an hour away. Is there anything else? He asked me. Hesitated again. Her lights flickered with patterns that could not read. Something she did not want to say. Something that frightened her even more than everything she had already shared. There is one more thing, she said. Finally, it may be the most important thing of all. Tell me their emotional bonding, their capacity for attachment. It is extreme. Frowned. Emotional bonding, that does not sound frightening. It should, me said. Commander, humans form intense emotional connections with other beings, not just with their own Kind, but with other species, they share their homes with creatures that could kill them, predators with claws and teeth, venomous animals. They call these creatures pets and they love them. They would die to protect them. They live with dangerous animals by choice. By choice, yes, they took wolves packed predators with sharp teeth and powerful jaws and bred them over generations until the wolves became loyal to humans. They call the results dogs. They sleep next to these animals. They let them near their offspring. They grieve when these animals die as intensely as they grieve for their own family members. Made a sound of confusion. Why would they do this? What could they possibly gain? Companionship, me said loyalty, love. Humans are capable of tremendous affection once they decide something is part of their group, part of their pack. They will defend it without limit, without reason, without concern for their own survival. She looked directly at this is why they are dangerous, Commander. Not because of their weapons, not because of their history of violence, but because of what happens when they decide something is theirs to protect. Understood? If humans could form such bonds with other species, with animals that had no technology, no language, no way to reciprocate except through simple loyalty, what would happen if they formed such bonds with they would have the most devoted allies in the galaxy. And what would happen if they decided there were enemies? They would have the most relentless enemies imaginable, a species that never stopped, never forgot, never gave up. We need to communicate with them, said we. Need to make them understand that we are not threats, not enemies, not prey. I have been attempting to refine our translation matrix. Communications. Officer Annie said, their language is strange but not impossible. I believe I can establish meaningful communication. Do it immediately. Annie worked at her console. The rest of the bridge watched the approaching ships. They were closer now, their ugly forms growing larger and more detailed. On the screen, could see markings on their hulls, symbols in the human writing system, numbers and letters that meant nothing to him, but clearly meant something to the crews aboard. I am ready to transmit, Anna said. Send this message ordered. We are the hegemony. We are peaceful explorers. We mean you no harm. We request dialogue. We wish to understand you and to be understood in return. Ani translated the message and sent it. They waited. The response came faster than expected. Vessel, a harsh voice said through the speakers. The translation was rough but understandable. We have received your message. You claim to be peaceful. Men have made such claims before. Some were lying. Stepped forward. We are not lying. They have not fought a war in 800 cycles. Violence is not our way. 800 cycles, the voice repeated, by your counting or hours by hours. I do not know how you measure time. A pause. When the voice spoke again, it sounded almost amused. 800 of your cycles, that is approximately 600 of our years. You have been at peace for 6 centuries. Yes, we have not. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Felt them settle over the bridge like a cold blanket. We have not. These beings, these humans, had been fighting for 600 years. While they had built their peaceful hegemony, the humans had been at war constantly, endlessly. We would like to change that, said Not. For us, we are already at peace with you, but for you, we could share our knowledge, our technology. We could help you find the peace that we have found. Silence stretched across the void. Between ships, wondered if he had said something wrong. Perhaps the offer was insulting. Perhaps the humans did not want peace. Finally the voice spoke. Again, you are approaching our territory, it said. You came armed with advanced technology that far surpasses our own, and your first instinct when you saw us was to retreat. We did not. You changed course, you moved away, you tried to maintain distance. The voice hardened. Those are the actions of a predator circling prey, or the actions of prey seeing a predator. Which are you? Did not know how to answer. Both he thought neither. We are something you have never seen before, and you are something we never imagined could exist. We are friends, he said finally, or we wish to be. We saw your ships and were surprised. Our change of course was caution, not aggression. We meant no offense. Another pause. The ships were very close. Now, through the enhanced sensors, could almost see the individual hull plates on the human vessels, metal and rivets and reinforced joints built to take damage, built to survive. You said you have not fought a war in 800 cycles, the voice said. That means you have no idea what war really is, what it costs, what it does to those who fight it. We know war from our history. It is a horror we left behind long ago. It is a horror we carry with us, the voice replied. Every human alive remembers war, not from history books, from lived experience, from loss, from the sound of weapons and the sight of death. We know war better than you can imagine. Then surely you want peace, said. We want peace, the voice agreed, but we have learned that peace must be protected, it must be earned, it must be defended, and sometimes to keep the peace, you must be willing to fight. Looked at the ships on his screen. War machines crewed by warriors from a world that had forged them in endless conflict. They did not want war, but they were ready for it, always ready. That readiness was built into their culture, their technology, their very bones. We are not your enemies, said. We have no wish to fight you. We have no wish to take anything from you. We only want to learn about you and to teach you about us. The voice was quiet for a long moment. Reduce your speed, it finally said. Hold position at your current location. We will approach and establish direct communication. Do not power any weapons. Do not make any sudden movements. If you are truly peaceful, you have nothing to fear from us, and if we refuse, asked, the answer came immediately without hesitation. Then we will assume you are not peaceful, and we will act accordingly. The channel closed. The human ships continued their approach and realized that for the first time in 800 cycles, they were facing beings who understood something they had forgotten. Peace was precious, peace was valuable, and peace, like everything worth having, sometimes had to be protected by those willing to make war. He gave the order to reduce speed and hold position. The crew obeyed without question, and together they waited for the humans to arrive. Predators meeting predators across the vast darkness of space. Whatever happened next would change everything. Captain stood on the bridge of the ISS, resilient, and studied the alien vessel. Through narrowed eyes, it was beautiful. There was no other word for it. The alien ship looked like something from a dream. Smooth curves and gentle lights, wrapped in energy shields that sparkled like captured starlight. It made the resilient look like a garbage truck parked next to a sculpture. Tactical analysis, she said. Lieutenant Commander Park worked his console with practiced efficiency. Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours, Captain, maybe more. Their shields could probably stop anything we throw at them. Their weapons, whatever they are, could vaporize us before we even finish targeting, so if they wanted us dead, we would be dead. Yes, ma'am. Several times over nodded slowly. This was not unexpected. Humanity had always known that when they finally met another space-faring species, that species would almost certainly be more advanced. The galaxy was billions of years old. Earth had only achieved space travel a few centuries ago. The odds of meeting someone at exactly the same technological level were essentially zero. What do we know about them? She asked. Science officer pulled up his readings. They call themselves they're part of something called the hegemony. Sounds like some kind of interstellar government or alliance. They claim to have been at peace for over 600 years. 600 years of peace. Let out a low whistle. Must be nice. Their ships have no visible weapons, continued, or rather, no weapons we can recognize. Their defensive systems are all energy-based, advanced shielding, possibly point defense lasers, no kinetic weapons that we can detect. Frown. No kinetic weapons at all. What about their military vessels? Captain, I don't think this is a military vessel. I think it's a science ship, an explorer. You're telling me we've been treating a group of scientists like hostile forces? Shrugged. They ran when they saw us. What were we supposed to think? Could not argue with that logic. When the Resilient and her sister ships had detected the unknown vessel, they had immediately moved to intercept. Standard protocol for unidentified craft. Coalition space. The alien ship had changed course, tried to increase distance. That looked like guilty behavior, like someone trying to avoid contact. But maybe it was not guilt, maybe it was fear. They scanned us pretty thoroughly. Lieutenant Park said, deep biological scans. They know what we are, what we're made of, where we come from, and they're scared. Said it was not a question they should be. Park replied, I've been looking at their biology, translucent skin, bioluminescent organs. They probably evolved on a calm, stable world. Low gravity, mild climate, no major predators. Paradise murmured, compared to Earth. Yes, they've never seen anything like us before. We must look like monsters to them. Considered this. She had grown up on the stories. Every human had the tales of alien invasions, of hostile species coming to conquer or destroy. For generations, humanity had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone and feared the answer. But what if the fear ran both ways? What if they had looked at their scans of the Resilience crew and felt the same terror that humans had always felt, imagining alien contact? What if to them humans were the nightmare, the impossible horror from a death world? Open a channel, she ordered. Let's try this again nicely. This time, communications officer nodded and worked her console. A moment later, the connection was established. Vessel said, this is captain of the United Earth Coalition ship, Resilient. We got off on the wrong foot. Let's start over. The response came quickly. The translation was rough but understandable. Some kind of universal translator algorithm was clearly working hard on both sides. Captain, I am Fleet Commander of the Hegemony vessel, Serenity of Stars. We appreciate your willingness to communicate. The voice was strange, melodic-like. Someone singing their words instead of speaking them. Found herself leaning forward slightly, curious despite herself. "Commander," she said, "I apologize if our approach seemed aggressive. We don't get many visitors out here. When we saw your ship, we weren't sure what to expect." "We were equally uncertain," the alien commander replied. "Your vessels are unlike anything we have encountered before." Smiled, though she knew the alien could not see it through audio alone. "I'll take that as a compliment. They're not pretty, but they're tough. That is what concerns us." The words were honest. Blunt appreciated that. Too many of her own superiors spoke in circles, never saying what they meant. This alien, this, said exactly what he was thinking. "You've been scanning us," said. "You know what we are, what our world is like." "Yes, it is difficult to believe. Let me guess. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, constant biological warfare, extreme temperature variations. How am I doing?" A pause. When spoke again, there was something different in his voice. Something almost like respect. "You know what you are. We know exactly what we are, Commander. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived because we refused to die. We're stubborn that way, so we have observed." Glanced at Park. He gave her slight nod. "Keep going. You're getting through." "Here's the thing," continued. "We've spent our whole history looking up at the stars and wondering what was out there. We imagined aliens, made up stories about them. Most of those stories were about aliens coming to Earth and trying to destroy us. You expected hostility. We expected the worst. We always expect the worst. It's kept us alive this long." Leaned forward. "But you know what? We never expected finding someone who was just as scared of us as we were of them." Silence stretched across the void. Could imagine the alien commander considering her words, comparing them to what his scanners had told him, trying to reconcile the monster in the data with the voice speaking to him. "Now you say you have been at peace for 600 years. Said we haven't had that luxury. We've spent the last century trying to unite our own species. It hasn't been easy. We've made mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but we're trying. Why are you telling us this? Because I want you to understand something. Yes, we're dangerous. Yes, we evolved on a world that would kill most species in days. Yes, we have weapons and armor and the instinct to fight, but that's not all we are." "Then what are you?" Smiled. "We're curious. We're explorers. We want to see what's out there." "Who's out there?" "We've dreamed of meeting other intelligent life for as long as we've been able to dream, and now here you are." "Here we are," echoed. "So my question is simple, Commander. Do you want to keep being scared of us, or do you want to get to know us?" Another long pause. Aboard the Serenity of Stars fleet commander turned to his bridge crew. Their lights were a confused mixture of colors, fear and hope and curiosity, all swirling together. They had heard the human captain's words. They were trying to process them. "She speaks well," said quietly, "but words are easy. How do we know she means what she says?" Did not answer immediately. He was thinking about what the human had said. "We've spent our whole history looking up at the stars and wondering what was out there. They had done the same thing. Every species did, but the humans had added something else. We imagined aliens coming to destroy us. They had expected enemies. They had prepared for enemies. And now meeting them for the first time, they were being careful, cautious, ready to fight if necessary, but also ready to talk. She is afraid of us, said slowly. As afraid as we are of her. That cannot be true, me protested. We pose no threat. To them, our weapons are far superior. But we have no intention of using them. They do not know that, they cannot know. That all they know is that we appeared in their space with technology beyond their understanding. How would we react in the same situation? The crew fell silent, looked at the main screen where the 3 human vessels held position in a defensive formation. He studied them with new eyes. Those ships were not just war machines, they were fortresses designed by a species that expected to be attacked, expected to be outnumbered, and expected to face overwhelming odds, and they had built them anyway. They had gone into space anyway. They had looked at the vast, unknown darkness between stars and said, yes, we will go there even though it might kill us. That was not the action of monsters, that was the action of dreamers, brave, terrified dreamers who refused to let fear stop them. Open the channel, said Aeneid. Captain said, you asked if we want to keep being scared of you, or if we want to get to know you. I must be honest, we are still scared. Your biology, your history, your capacity for violence. These things are difficult for us to understand. I get that, replied. We're scary. It's not exactly what I put on a dating profile, but it's the truth. Did not understand the reference, but he sensed the humor behind it. The human was trying to ease the tension, trying to make a connection despite the fear on both sides. However, continued, we did not travel across the stars to run from that which we do not understand. We came to learn, to explore, to find others who share the darkness with us. That's pretty much why we're out here. Then perhaps we have more in common than the differences between our species would suggest. Perhaps we made a decision. It was not an easy decision. It went against every instinct of caution and self-preservation that his training had given him, but sometimes progress required risk, sometimes understanding required a leap of faith. We propose a meeting, he said, face to face, your commander and mine in neutral space. Between our vessels. No weapons, no guards, just 2 beings talking. Silence stretched across the communication channel, waited, his lights flickering with anticipation. Beside him made a sound of protest, but raised a hand to silence him. This was the moment. Everything depended on what the human said next. Aboard, the resilient captain sat back in her chair and considered the offer. Face to face. The alien wanted to meet her personally. In person, outside the safety of her ship, with nothing between her and a creature whose technology could destroy. The resilient with barely an effort. It was insane. It was also exactly what she would have suggested if she had thought of it. First, Captain Lieutenant Park said quietly, this could be a trap. Could be, agreed. Their technology is vastly superior. If they wanted to capture you, study you, they could do that anyway. If they wanted us dead or captured, we'd be dead or captured already. The fact that we're still talking means they want something else, but to go out there alone. Not alone, looked at her tactical officer. I'll have the entire United Earth Coalition at my back, every human who ever lived, every struggle, every war, every triumph. I'll carry all of that with me. Park fell silent. There was nothing more to say. Open the channel again. Commander, I accept your Proposal, one shuttle, no weapons. Neutral space, just you and me. You are. Brave said, no, I'm just really curious. There was something that might have been. A laugh in the alien's response, or maybe just a flicker of confusion at human humor. Either way, the tension seemed to ease slightly. We will launch in 30 of your minutes, said. Please confirm. Coordinates. Confirmed. Coordinates are being sent. Now the channel closed, stood and straightened her uniform. The crew of the Resilient watched her with a mixture of respect and concern. They knew what she was about to do. They knew the risks. Lieutenant Park, you have this. Said, if anything goes wrong, it won't. If anything goes wrong, repeated firmly. You get the hell out of here and report back to command. Tell them what we found. Tell them what we learned. Make sure humanity knows that we're not alone. Park nodded slowly. Yes, Captain. Walked toward the bridge exit. Then she paused and looked back. And Park, if I don't come back, tell my sister I was right. There is other life out there, and it wants to meet us. She left the bridge without waiting for a response. Shuttle bay of the Resilient was a cramped functional space, no decoration, no comfort, just equipment, tools, and the small shuttle that would carry to her meeting with the unknown. She climbed inside and ran through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency, engines, navigation, life support, communications, everything checked out. The shuttle was ready. She sealed the hatch and requested launch clearance. Clearance granted, Captain. Park's voice came through the speaker. Good luck. Luck's got nothing to do with it. See you on the other side. Shuttle launched, felt the familiar push of acceleration as the small craft shot out of the bay and into the darkness of space. Around her, the stars glittered with cold, ancient light. Ahead of her, the vessel glowed like a jewel. She piloted toward the coordinates they had agreed upon, a point in empty space, exactly between the two groups of ships. Neutral ground, or as close to neutral as you could get in the vacuum. As she approached, she saw another craft coming from the direction of the ship. It was smaller than her shuttle, sleeker, designed with the same elegant curves as the main vessel. It moved through space with the grace of a living creature. The two shuttles reached the coordinates at almost the same moment. They stopped, facing each other across a few hundred meters of nothing. Opened a shore train. Channel Commander, I'm here, as am I. Captain, how shall we proceed? I'll extend my docking collar. You can come aboard, or I can come to you. Your choice. A pause. Perhaps we should meet outside in space itself, between our vessels with nothing but the void to witness. Considered this. It was dramatic, maybe a bit theatrical, but it also meant neither of them would have the advantage of home territory. They would both be equally vulnerable. Agreed. Suit up. I'll see you out there. She sealed her flight suit and checked her helmet systems, oxygen, temperature, pressure, all green. She moved to the airlock, cycled through, and stepped out into space. It never got old, the moment of leaving a craft and floating free in the universe, the infinite darkness stretching in all directions, the stars, so many stars burning with light that had traveled millions of years to reach her eyes. She used small thruster burst to move toward the center point between the shuttles. Ahead of her, she saw a figure emerging from the craft. Her first impression was of height. The alien was tall, much taller than her, with limbs that seemed too long and joints that bent in unexpected ways. Its Skin was translucent and she could see soft lights glowing beneath the surface. Bioluminescence, she remembered. They communicate with light. The alien suit was different from hers. Instead of rigid plates and sealed joints, it looked almost like a second skin. Flexible, organic. The helmet was transparent, giving her a clear view of the creature's face. Large eyes, no nose that she could see. A small mouth. The face was alien, yes, but not frightening. It was gentle, curious, and very, very nervous. They drifted to a stop about 10 m apart. For a long moment neither spoke. They simply looked at each other, two beings from worlds so different they might as well be from separate universes. Then Captain did something that was not in any first contact protocol, something that came purely from instinct. She raised her hand and waved. The alien, she reminded herself, he has a name, seemed confused. His lights flickered in patterns she could not read, but then, slowly, hesitantly, he raised one of his long-fingered hands and moved it back and forth. A wave, an alien meeting. A human for the first time had just waved back at her, felt something loosen in her chest, something she had not even realized was tight. Maybe, just maybe, this was going to be okay. Commander, she said through her suit speaker, it's nice to finally meet you. Captain, the feeling is mutual. I believe that is the correct word. Close enough, she smiled, knowing he could see it through her helmet. So here we are, two people floating in space between our ships, first contact between our species. Any thoughts? Lights flickered again. Many thoughts. Too many. I do not know where to begin. How about we start simple? What do you want to know about us? The alien was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost wondering. Everything, he said. I want to know everything. Laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of her by the earnestness in his voice. That might take a while. Commander, we've been around for a few hundred years. We've got a lot of stories. Then we should begin, said, because we have stories too, and I believe we have much to share with each other. The stars watched in silence as two beings so different, so frightened of each other, began the long, slow process of becoming friends. The meeting in space lasted for 3 hours. When it was over, Captain returned to the Resilient. With her mind spinning, she had talked more in those 3 hours than she had in months. She had answered questions about everything: Earth's geography, human biology, their history, their wars, their art, their music. The alien commander had absorbed every word with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. And he had asked about fear. That was what stuck with her. Of all the things wanted to understand about humanity, fear was what fascinated him most. How could a species that felt fear so deeply also do things that were so terrifying? How could creatures who knew the danger still walk toward it? Had not known how to answer. Fear was just part of being human. You felt it, you acknowledged it, and then you did what needed to be done. Anyway, that was normal, that was survival. But apparently to thee it was something extraordinary. Meanwhile, aboard the Serenity of Stars, Fleet Commander returned to his ship with a burden of new knowledge that would take cycles to fully process. Human Captain had been not what he expected. She was smaller than the scanner data had suggested and softer. Somehow, her skin was not hard like armor but yielding, warm when they had briefly touched hands through their suits, her eyes those predator's eyes that had frightened him so deeply, held no malice, they sparkled with curiosity and humor and a surprising kindness. She had laughed at his questions, not mocking laughter but warm laughter, the sound of someone delighted by the conversation. When he had asked about human weapons, she had been honest about their capacity for destruction, but she had also looked sad, as if the weapons were a burden rather than a source of pride. We wish we didn't need them, she had said. We really, really wish we didn't. Now stood in his quarters, looking at the data scrolling across his personal screen. He had asked the human captain to share cultural files, images, recordings, histories. She had agreed without hesitation, sending over what she called the basics. The basics were overwhelming. He began with their history, thinking he understood what to expect: war and violence, as the earlier scans had suggested, and yes, that was there. Terrible wars, weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light, conflicts that killed millions. But that was not all. Between the wars, and sometimes during them, humans created beauty. They painted pictures that made breath catch in his throat. They wrote words that seemed to capture emotions he did not have names for. They made music, vibrations in air that somehow touched something deep inside his mind. One recording showed humans dancing, moving their bodies in patterns that served no practical purpose but were beautiful simply for beauty's sake. Another showed them singing together, hundreds of voices joining into a single harmony that seemed to fill the universe. They built massive structures to honor their dead. They created gardens to celebrate life. They wrote stories about imaginary worlds and characters who had never existed, and they shared these stories across generations, passing down wisdom disguised as entertainment. Watched a recording of something called a symphony orchestra. Over 100 humans sat together in a vast hall, each holding a different instrument. At a signal from a single figure at the front, the conductor, the file explained, they began to play. The music that followed was unlike anything had ever heard. It swelled and faded, rushed and slowed, expressing emotions that words could never capture: joy and sorrow and longing and triumph, all woven together into a tapestry of sound. These were the same beings who had built nuclear weapons, the same beings who had fought wars that killed millions. They could create such beauty and such horror, and somehow they contained both within their small, fragile bodies. There was a chime at his door. Paused the recording. Enter science officer Me stepped into his quarters. Her lights were fluctuating with patterns he recognized as uncertainty mixed with determination. She was about to tell him something difficult. Commander, she said, I have continued my analysis of the human data files. There is something you must see. Show me. Me connected her personal device to his screen. The symphony orchestra vanished, replaced by images that were very different. The first image showed a human standing next to a large, four-legged creature. The creature had pointed ears, a long snout, and sharp teeth visible in what Me explained was a smile. The human had one arm wrapped around the creature's neck. Both appeared relaxed, happy. This is what they call a dog, Me said. It is a domesticated predator. Notice the teeth. Notice the claws. This animal could easily harm the human, but it does not. It does not. Humans took wild wolves, pack hunters that worked together to bring down prey and bred them over thousands of cycles. They selected for traits like loyalty, gentleness, and affection. The result is the dog, an animal that is biologically a predator, but emotionally bonded to humans. Study the image. The creature was clearly dangerous. Those teeth could tear flesh, those claws could wound, but it sat peacefully beside the human, its eyes bright with what could only be described as love. They live with these animals in their homes, me continued. They let them near their children. They grieve when these animals die sometimes, as deeply as they grieve for their own family members. Why would they do this? I have been trying to understand that myself. Me changed the image. Now it showed a different animal, smaller with soft fur and round eyes. This is called a cat. It is also a predator, also domesticated. Humans have these in their homes as well. Another image. A snake, a creature with no limbs, covered in scales with fangs that could inject poison. Some humans keep these as companions, me said, even though they are venomous, even though they are objectively dangerous. This makes no sense. I thought so too, until I looked deeper. Me changed the display again. Now it showed a human family, 2 adults and 2 children, gathered together in a room. They were smiling, touching each other. The image radiated warmth. Humans form intense emotional bonds, me said, with each other, with other species, even with objects. They develop attachments to places, to possessions, to abstract concepts like flags and songs, and once they bond with something, they will protect it with their lives. They bond with their prey animals, not just prey animals, everything. If a human decides something is part of their group, their pack, their family, it will defend it without limit, without logic, without concern for their own survival. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What happens if they decide we are enemies? Me's lights flickered. I found data on that as well. Historical records. What happens when humans go to war against something? Hate. She changed the display one final time. The images that followed were difficult to look at. Burned cities, destroyed civilizations, enemies pursued across continents and oceans, hunted without mercy, given no opportunity to surrender or retreat. The humans did not fight the way they remembered from their ancient history. They did not meet their enemies in single battles and accept the outcome. They kept coming. If they lost a battle, they fought another. If they lost a war, they started a new one. They rebuilt their armies and returned to the conflict, sometimes generations later, carrying the memory of defeat like a wound that never healed. They do not forget, me said quietly. That is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. Injuries done to them are remembered, passed down through stories and teachings. They can hold grudges for centuries. Stared at the images. A species that never forgot, never gave up, never stopped pursuing what they wanted, whether that was justice or vengeance. But they can also forgive, me added. That is the strange part. Some of their greatest former enemies have become their closest allies. They fought terrible wars against each other, wars that killed millions, and then they made peace, real peace. They became friends. How is that possible? How can they hate so deeply and then forgive? I do not know. It seems contradictory, but humans are contradictory. They contain both extremes. The the capacity for absolute destruction and the capacity for profound love. It depends on how they are treated, how they are approached. Thought about his conversation with Captain. She had been friendly, open, willing to share, but she had also been cautious, always ready for the conversation to turn hostile, always prepared to defend herself if necessary. That was the human way. They hoped for the best but prepared for the worst. They offered friendship but kept weapons close at hand. They trusted slowly, carefully, after being shown that trust was warranted. There is one more thing, me said. Something I discovered that may be the most important detail of all. Tell me. Humans are not just dangerous in combat. They are persistent, relentless. When they want something, they pursue it with absolute dedication. I know about their hunting methods, following prey until it collapses. This extends beyond hunting. It applies to everything they do, their science, their exploration, their relationships. Me's lights took on a pattern of reluctant admiration. When humans decided to go to space, they had no technology to do so, so they built it. When their rockets failed, they built new ones. When their astronauts died, they mourned and then sent more. Nothing stopped them, nothing even slowed them down. They lost people and continued. Yes, they know the risks of exploration. They accept that some of them will die in the pursuit of knowledge, and they go anyway. They call it courage. We would call it madness, but it has carried them to the stars. Sat in silence, processing everything he had learned. These humans were terrifying, yes, but they were also inspiring, a species that had every reason to destroy itself, to collapse under the weight of its own violence, but instead reach for the stars. They were dreamers, fighters, lovers, killers, all of these things at once, all contained within their small, warm bodies. The door chimed again. This time it was First Commander. Commander, he said, Captain is requesting another communication. Straightened. What does she want? She says she has a proposal, something she wants to discuss before our ships go their separate ways. Exchanged a glance with me. They had learned so much about humans in such a short time, but there was still so much more to understand, so much that could not be captured in data files and historical records. Open the channel, said. He moved to the command center of his quarters, where a small communication screen waited. Moment later, Captain's face appeared. She looked different now, more relaxed, less guarded. The weariness was still there beneath the surface, but something had shifted. Commander, she said, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Captain. What did you wish to discuss? Leaned back in her chair. I've been thinking about what you said during our meeting, about your hegemony, about how you've brought together 17 different species in peace. Yes, it is our greatest achievement. How did you do it? How did you convince 17 different species to join you? Consider the question. We offered them the benefits of cooperation, trade, technology, knowledge, protection. We showed them that they would gain more by joining us than by standing apart, and they just agreed. No conflicts, no wars. There were negotiations. Some were difficult, but we always found common ground. We believe that all intelligent life shares certain fundamental desires: safety, prosperity, understanding. By appealing to those desires, we brought worlds together. Nodded slowly. That's a nice philosophy. I hope it works on us. Why would it not? Because we're not like Your other species, Commander, we're not. From a gentle world, we didn't evolve in paradise. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day, and we fought back so hard that we conquered it. We tamed fire, we split atoms, we bent the laws of nature to our will. I'm aware of your history, then you know that we're not easy to work with. We're stubborn, proud, quick to anger, and slow to forget. We've made more mistakes than I can count, and will probably make more in the future. Felt his lights dim. You are trying to warn me away. No. Leaned forward. I'm trying to be honest with you, because if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to build something between our species, then you need to know what you're getting into. And what are we getting into, Captain? The best friends you'll ever have. Smiled, or the worst enemies imaginable. There's no middle ground with humans. We don't do things halfway. If we commit to something, we commit completely. If we love something, we'll die to protect it. If we hate something, we'll tear the universe apart to destroy it. Remembered the images me had shown him, the burned cities, the generational grudges, the enemies hunted across continents, but also the music, the art, the dogs, and children and families gathered in warmth. You are offering us a choice, he said. I'm offering you a chance. Right now we're strangers, we don't know each other, we don't trust each other, but that can change. We can learn, we can grow, we can become allies, real allies, not just people who tolerate each other's existence. And if we choose not to pursue this alliance, its expression shifted. The warmth remained, but there was steel beneath it. Then we go our separate ways, no hard feelings, but you'll always know we're out here, and we'll always know you're out there, too. Species who could have been friends but chose not to try. Understood the subtext. The humans would not force the issue. They would not demand alliance or threaten war, but they also would not forget this moment, would not forget the choice they had made, and someday, cycles or centuries from now, that choice might matter. I must consult with my government, said. This decision is larger than me. It affects the entire hegemony. Of course, take whatever time you need. But personally, paused, gathering his thoughts. His light shifted to patterns he had not displayed in centuries. Hope mixed with uncertainty, like a child facing something new and exciting and frightening all at once. Personally, Captain, I believe that they have much to learn from humanity. Your art, your music, your persistence, your capacity to create beauty even in the midst of horror. These are things we have forgotten in our peaceful centuries, things we may need again someday. Eyes widen slightly. You want to learn from us, even knowing what we are, especially knowing what we are. You are proof that life can survive anything, that evolution can produce beings who refuse to be destroyed, that intelligence and determination can overcome any obstacle. We're also proof that intelligent life can be really, really violent. Yes, that too, but violence is not your only trait. It is not even your defining trait. You are survivors, Captain. Dreamers, builders. You look at the impossible and say, not yet, and then you make it possible. Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Commander, do you know what I was most afraid of when we detected your ships? That we would attack you. No, that you would be like us, that somewhere out there in the galaxy was a species just as violent, just as stubborn, just as good at destruction, another group of Apex predators fighting us for territory. And what are you afraid of now? That you'll realize what we are and decide. We're too dangerous to befriend. That you'll go back to your hegemony and tell them to stay away from Earth space too. Build barriers and defenses and weapons, just in case we ever come knocking. You fear rejection, said every human. Does we pretend we don't care what others think of us, but deep down we all want to be accepted, to be understood, to find our place in the universe. Shrugged, a very human gesture that was beginning to recognize we've been alone for a long time, Commander, ever since we first looked up at the stars and wondered who else was out there. Finding you, even if you decide we're too scary to be friends with, means something to us. You are not alone anymore. No, I guess we're not. They looked at each other through the screen, two beings from worlds that could not be more different. One evolved in peace, the other in chaos, one built for harmony, the other for survival. They had no reason to trust each other. Every logical argument suggested caution, but sometimes logic was not enough. Sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. I will speak to the hegemony, said. I will tell them what I have seen, what I have learned. I will recommend that we pursue friendship with humanity. And what will you tell them about us when they ask if we're dangerous? Lights brighten to their most intense shade of blue, the expression of absolute sincerity. I will tell them that you are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, that your world is a nightmare and your history is written in blood, that you have weapons that can destroy planets and the will to use them. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. Let me finish. Leaned closer to the screen. I will also tell them that you crossed the stars not to conquer but to explore, that you reached out to us in peace even though you were afraid, that you create beauty as naturally as you create destruction, and that when you commit to something, to a friendship, to an alliance, to a cause, you commit with your whole hearts. You think they'll listen. I think they will be terrified, just as I was when I first saw your ships, but I also think they will be curious just as I was, and curiosity, Captain, is how they have always begun their greatest relationships. Grinned. It was a wide open expression that showed her teeth, predator's teeth. Reminded himself, but somehow not threatening at all. Then I guess we'll see what happens next, she said. Whatever it is, Commander, I'm glad we met. I'm glad we talked, and I'm glad we're not shooting at each other, as am I, Captain, as am I. The channel closed. Sat in the silence of his quarters, thinking about the future. It was uncertain, it was dangerous, it was full of possibilities, both wonderful and terrible, but it was not empty. It was not alone. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness, between stars, humanity was waiting to see what they would decide, and for the first time in 800 cycles, they had a truly interesting choice to make. The universe had just become much larger and much more complicated, and maybe possibly, hopefully much more beautiful, all because of a species that should not have existed at all. 6 standard cycles passed after the first contact between the hegemony and the United Earth Coalition. In that time everything changed. Fleet Commander had returned to the hegemony. With his report, he had stood before the High Council, the governing body of 17 worlds, and told them about humanity. He had shown them the data, the images, the history, the art, the weapons. The Council had reacted with predictable Fear. Many had argued for isolation. Build defenses, establish borders, keep the humans contained in their small corner of the galaxy where they could not threaten anyone, but had also shown them the music. He had played the recording of the symphony orchestra, 100 humans working in perfect harmony to create something beautiful. He had shown them images of human families, of children playing, of people helping strangers in times of crisis. He had told them about Captain, about her honesty, her humor, her willingness to meet him alone in the void despite her fear. These beings are not monsters, he had said. They are people, strain people, frightening people, but people nonetheless. They want what we want: connection, understanding, a place in the universe. The debate had lasted for weeks. Arguments for and against, warnings of danger, promises of opportunity, old fears fighting new hopes. In the end, the council had voted to pursue contact cautiously, slowly, with many safeguards in place, but they had chosen to open a door rather than build a wall. Now, 6 cycles later, that door had opened wider than anyone expected. The delegation arrived at Earth Orbital Station 7 on a bright morning, as such things were measured in space. Their ship, a diplomatic vessel called the Bridge of Understanding, docked smoothly with the human station. Airlocks connected, atmosphere equalized, and for the first time in galactic history, walked on human territory. Led the delegation. He was older now, his skin showing the cloudiness of advancing age, but his light still burned bright with curiosity. Beside him walked Ambassador Me. She had earned the title after her crucial work in those first days of contact, and a dozen other officials waiting for them on the other side of the airlock was a face knew well. Commander Captain said. She was older too, her hair streaked with gray now, but her smile was the same. Welcome to Earth, or at least as close to Earth as we could manage on short notice. Captain, it is good to see you again. Admiral, now actually they promoted me after I convinced an alien species to be our friends. Apparently that's worth few extra stars on the uniform. Lights flickered with amusement. He had learned to understand human humor over the years. Congratulations, Admiral. The promotion is well deserved. I'm not so sure about that, but I'll take it. Gestured down the corridor. Please come this way. There's a lot of people who want to meet you. The delegation followed her through the station. It was a strange environment, functional rather than beautiful, built for efficiency rather than elegance, but there were touches of personality everywhere. Photographs on walls, plants in small containers, children's artwork displayed. Outside what appeared to be a school area. You have children here? Me asked, surprised. Sure, this station has about 5,000 permanent residents. Families live here, work here, raise their kids here. It's a little city floating in space, and they are not afraid, living so far from the safety of your planet. Shrugged. Humans have always been explorers, always pushed into new territories. Space is just the frontier. People want to be part of that, even if it means raising kids in a metal box. They passed through a large open area, park of all things, with grass and trees, and a small pond. Children would have been terrified of such a place, but human children ran and played and laughed, their voices echoing off the distant walls. This is beautiful, said. You brought nature with you. We couldn't leave it behind. We tried to make space Stations that were purely functional. Efficient, but people got sad. Depressed, they needed green things. Growing things, reminders of home. Thought about his own ship, the Serenity. Of stars. It was elegant and advanced. But it contained nothing like this, no. Parks, no gardens, nothing that existed. Simply to bring joy, perhaps they had. Something to learn from humans after. All they continued through the station. Passing meeting rooms and dining halls. And recreation areas, humans of all. Descriptions worked and talked and lived. Their lives, some stopped to stare at. The delegation, others waved cheerfully. And continued about their business, they. Do not seem afraid of us, me observed. Should they be, when we first detected? Human ships, we were terrified of you. We expected your people to react the same way to us, laughed, oh, plenty of. People are scared, there were protests. When the government announced formal relations with the hegemony. People worried you were invaders, conquerors, coming to take our resources or enslave our population. And now they've seen the data, they know your history, a species that has been at peace for 6 centuries doesn't suddenly turn around and start conquering neighbors. Besides, you brought us technology that's already saving lives, new medical treatments, better environmental controls, that counts for a lot. They reached a large set of double doors, stopped and turned to face the delegation. Through these doors is the main assembly hall, she said. Inside are representatives from every major nation on Earth, scientists, politicians, artists, soldiers. They've come to meet you, to learn about you, and to show you who we are. Are we ready for this? Asked. Probably not, but that's never stopped us before. Smiled. Are you ready? Looked at his delegation. Me's lights were steady and bright. The others showed varying degrees of nervousness but also excitement. They had traveled so far to reach this moment. They had risked so much. We are ready, he said, nodded and pushed open the doors. The assembly hall was massive. It could have held thousands of people, and it looked like it was trying. 2 rows of seats stretched up toward the distant ceiling, filled with humans of every description, old and young, male and female, skin colors ranging from pale to dark, clothing that varied wildly in style and color. But what struck most was not the people, it was the silence. As they entered, every voice in the hall fell quiet. Every eye turned toward them, thousands of humans, all staring at the alien visitors who had come from the stars. In that silence, felt the weight of the moment. 2 species meeting across an impossible gulf of evolution and history. 2 worlds trying to bridge a gap that should not be bridgeable. And then someone started to clap. It was a single pair of hands somewhere in the vast crowd, but others joined in others. The clapping spread through the hall like a wave, growing louder and more rhythmic. People stood from their seats, adding their applause. The sound was overwhelming. It crashed over the delegation like water over rocks, not hostile, not fearful, welcoming, celebrating. They are happy to see us, me asked her, lights flickering with disbelief. Very happy, confirmed. You're the first aliens most of them have ever seen. They've dreamed about this moment their whole lives. We all have. Walked forward, his delegation following. Podium had been set up at the front of the hall, and he made his way toward it. The applause continued until he reached the podium and raised his hands for quiet. Gradually the sound faded. Thousands of humans sat back down there, eyes still fixed on the alien before them, waiting, hopping. Spoken translation systems carried his words to every ear in the hall. When I first detected your ships, he began, I was afraid, my crew was afraid. We looked at your vessels and saw war machines. We analyzed your biology and found creatures from our worst nightmares. Everything we knew about you suggested danger. He paused, letting the words sink in. We were wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Continued. Not about the danger. You are dangerous. Perhaps the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever seen. Your world forged you in fire and blood and constant struggle. You evolved not in peace but in conflict. You carry weapons that can destroy planets and the will to use them if necessary. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. But danger is not the same as evil, and capacity for violence is not the same as desire for violence. In our time studying your species, we learned something far more important than your military capabilities. Slights brighten, shifting to patterns of warmth and respect. We learned that you are dreamers, artists, lovers. You create beauty as easily as you create destruction. You form bonds of loyalty, an affection that transcends species and logic. You look at the impossible and call it a challenge. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces watching him, with hope and fear and curiosity. You crossed the void between stars, not because it was easy, but because you could not bear to stay on the ground. You reach for the heavens because that is what you are, reachers, estivers, beings who refuse to accept limits. Spread his arms wide. My people have been at peace for 600 of your years. We thought we had learned everything there was to learn about civilization, about harmony, about growth, but meeting you has taught us that we still have much to discover. He bowed his head, a gesture of respect that transcended species. You have shown us that life can thrive anywhere, that intelligence can emerge from chaos, that hope can survive anything, even a world determined to destroy it. And you have reminded us that the universe is vast and strange and full of wonders we have not yet imagined. When he raised his head, his lights were blazing with sincerity. Humanity, we do not come to you as rulers or teachers. We come as friends, allies, fellow travelers in the endless night between stars. We have much to share with you, technology, knowledge, the wisdom of 17 worlds, but we also have much to learn from you. He smiled, a strange expression on a face, but one he had practiced for this moment. Let us walk together, let us grow together. Let us face the darkness together, and let us show the universe what we can achieve when fear gives way to friendship. Applause that followed was louder than before. It shook the walls, it filled the air. It seemed to go on forever. Step back from the podium and let the sound wash over him. Beside him, me was weeping tears, a human trait she had somehow developed over years of contact. Around him, his delegation stood in odd silence, their lights flickering with emotions they could not name. Admiral stepped up beside him. That was a hell of a speech, Commander. It was only the truth. Yeah, well, the truth doesn't always get a standing ovation. She looked out at the cheering crowd. You know, 6 years ago I thought this moment would never happen. First contact with aliens, actual friendship between species, it seemed like a fairy tale. And now it seems like the beginning of something amazing. Turn to face him. I want you to know something, whatever happens next, however this alliance develops. I'm glad we met. I'm glad we talked instead of fighting. I'm glad you gave us a chance. I am glad as well. He used her first name deliberately, a human gesture of intimacy that still felt strange on his tongue. You showed me that fear can be overcome, that strangers can become friends, that the universe is better than I imagined. Well, don't get too sentimental. We've still got a lot of work to do, treaties to negotiate, technology to share, cultural misunderstandings to sort out. It's going to be messy. I expect nothing less from humanity. Laughed Fairpoint. The ceremony continued for hours. Speeches were made. Agreements were signed. Hands were shaken, a human custom that they had adopted with great enthusiasm. By the time it was over, both delegations were exhausted but satisfied. 100 cycles passed. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The alliance between the hegemony and the United Earth Coalition had grown into something much larger, the combined Galactic Federation. They called it a union of 37 species, all working together in peace and prosperity. Humans had spread across the stars as everyone knew they would. They brought their chaos and their creativity, their stubbornness and their art. They built colonies on worlds that should have been uninhabitable. They pushed into unknown space, always reaching, always striving, always dreaming, and they brought their friendships with them. Human ships now carried crews of mixed species. Scientists worked alongside human researchers. Children of all origins played together in the parks of space, stations and colony worlds. The boundaries between species had begun to blur. Not everyone was happy about this. Some feared the humans, their energy, their ambition, their capacity for violence. Wars had nearly broken out on several occasions as old tensions flared and new conflicts emerged, but the Federation had held, and in those darkest moments, it was often humans who stood on the front lines, defending the peace they had helped to build. They were good at that. On the anniversary of First Contact, celebrated now as Friendship Day across 100 worlds, a very old sat in a garden on Earth. His skin was clouded with age, his lights dim and flickering, but his eyes were still bright with curiosity. A young human girl approached him. She could not have been more than 8 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes that reminded him of someone he had known long ago. Are you the alien from the stories? She asked. I am, replied. His voice was weak now, but still clear. Though I prefer to be called, my grandmother talks about you, she says. You were the first to talk to humans. Is that true? It is true, though I was not alone. Many others helped build the bridge between our worlds. The girl sat down beside him, her legs swinging over the edge of the bench. Were you scared when you first saw humans? Very scared, terrified, in fact. Why? Consider the question, how to explain to this child, this bright, innocent, curious child, the fear that had gripped him when he first looked at the data from those impossible ships. Because you were different, he said finally. Because you came from a world that should have killed you, because you had weapons and history and the look of predators in your eyes. But we're not scary, the girl protested. We're just people. Yes, that is what I learned. That is what the whole galaxy learned. Eventually reached out with a trembling hand and gently touched the girl's hair. You are just people, strange and wonderful and terrifying people, but people nonetheless. The girl smiled. My grandmother says humans and are going to be friends forever. I hope she is right. She's always right, laughed a human sound that he had learned over his long life. Then, it must be true. The girl looked out at the garden, at the trees and flowers and paths where humans and members of a dozen other species walk together. Do you think there are more aliens out there, more people we haven't met yet? I'm certain of it. The universe is vast, beyond imagining. There are always more friends to find and more scary things too, perhaps, but that is why friendship is so important. When we stand together, we are stronger than anything the darkness can send against us. The girl nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her. Then she stood up and brushed off her clothes. I have to go. My grandmother is waiting, but it was nice to meet you. It was nice to meet you as well, young one. She ran off, disappearing around a corner with the boundless energy of youth. Watched her go, his lights flickering with a warmth that had nothing to do with his failing biology. 100 cycles, 37 species, countless friendships forged across the gulf between stars, and it had all started with fear. He remembered that fear now, as clearly as if it had been yesterday. The moment when his scanners had detected the human ships, the moment when he had realized that the universe contained something more dangerous than anything that had ever imagined. He remembered running, trying to escape, certain that the strange, impossible creatures from the death world meant only harm. He had been wrong. Not about the danger. Humans were still dangerous, would always be dangerous. That was simply what they were, a species forged in fire, tempered by struggle, sharpened by endless conflict with their world and with each other. But danger was not destiny, and fear was not forever. Looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once seemed so cold and empty. Now they were full of life, full of friendship, full of hope, all because two species meeting for the first time had chosen to talk instead of fight. The universe was vast and strange and sometimes terrifying, but it was also beautiful, and that beauty was worth protecting, worth fighting for if necessary. Fortunately, they had humanity for that. Smiled and closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over him. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of the Federation, keeping the peace. Somewhere out there, children of a dozen species played together and dreamed of the stars. And somewhere out there, the future waited. A future that had begun with fear and become something wonderful.